Good morning, viewers. Welcome to TechMac TV, and this is Morning News. My name is Nicole Madziwa, and joining me is my usual lovely co-host,
Marvelous Shibagiri, and welcome once again to Morning News. And this program is brought to you courtesy of TechMac TV. Techers to the Sunday Mail.
So from the Sunday Mail, the major headline there reads, Global Capitals back in Zim.
Reproductive bill divides party.
Still on the same paper, US 50 million agri equipment duck in SA.
ED commands EU dialogue progress was the last headline from the Sunday Mail.
And from the Daily News on Sunday, Trump's fires warning shots at ED and Zanu PF.
And from the Daily News this morning, reform or suffer, ED and Zanu PF told.
And from the Herald, NAST develops Zim's first trolley bus.
Fresh pay hike for civil servants on the cards.
And still on the Herald, Minister sanctioning draws government's eye.
And from the Newsday, we ain't moved by the march, EU and the US.
Those were the major headlines from our local papers from Sunday and today this morning. So for now for the news in detail, I'll give this back to you.
So from the Sunday Mail, we have the headline, Reproductive bill divides party, and the story reads, the furor over the name to be adopted by personnel who teach sexual reproductive issues in schools as envisaged by Clause 14 of the Education Amendment Bill has split Parliament, with Senate expressing strong reservations on naming them sexual and reproductive health personnel. Senators argued that the use of the word sexual has negative connotations to local culture and could erode the country's moral fabric. It is recommended the amendment of the clause by scrapping the word sexual and. However, the National Assembly has rejected the amendment, which is bogged down passage of the bill. Speaker of the National Assembly, Advocate Jacob Mudenda, said a 90-day waiting period will be observed, after which the bill will be represented to President Emerson Mnangagwa. Of all the issues we have in the nation, we decide to have a debate on whether to use the word sexual.
Well, I will reserve my comment there. Still on the same paper, global capitals back in Zim. That's still on the Sunday Mail. And the story reads, the push to remove sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe by the West is gaining traction after the African Union, China, Japan, and SADC diplomats around the world lent their voice for the embargo to be lifted. AU Commission Chairperson Mr. Musa Faki on Friday added diplomatic heft to SADC's efforts by calling for the immediate removal of the sanctions. It's a very interesting topic, actually.
So by global capitals who are backing Zimbabwe, we mean China and Japan.
Yes, those, absolutely. When you put it that way, now it's...
Well, that's it. The headline is pretty misleading.
Yeah, well, but hey, it's their friends, our friends, should I say. So, yeah, I mean...
Well, after the Friday anti-sanctions march, we had to see the changes that are to be brought about by the development, if it's going to be a fruitful effort or if it's going to be fruits that is regarding the removal of the sanctions. And with the backing of China and Japan, our friends from the East, we can only wait. Still moving on, ED commands EU dialogue progress. President Emerson Mnangagwa has commended the European Union, EU, for removing the bulk of sanctions it imposed on Zimbabwe and engaging in progressive dialogue. The 28-member bloc imposed sanctions on Harare in 2002, but has been progressively reviewing the embargo and recognition of reforms being undertaken by government. Sanctions that remain include travel bans on the late former president, Robert Mugabe, his widow, Mrs. Grace Mugabe, 3 other officials, Vice President Dr. Constantino Chiwenga, General Philip Valerius Sibanda was the commander of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, and an arms embargo. The trade embargo was lifted, allowing economic cooperation between the parties. Addressing the people gathered at the National Sports Stadium to mark the Southern Africa Development Community initiated Anti-Sanctions Solidarity Day, President Mnangagwa praised the EU for constantly reviewing the measures.
Isn't it the same EU that actually tweeted over the weekend saying that we never imposed any sanctions? Rather, please check out that tweet. Go on. I don't want to say something that I'm not particularly sure, but I'm sure, I'm so sure. I barely remember my dreams, so it can't be a dream, okay? So yeah, please do go on the EU Twitter handle and check the response by EU on this.
But isn't this the same gentleman who was saying Hatijili? Now he's also commending the EU. So now I'm confused because I was there at the National Sports Stadium. But however, we'll probably give you a few videos of the street reactions that we had later on in the day. And it's actually, I don't know if it's sad or if it's weird or funny that some people actually do not know what sanctions are. Some people know that there's sanctions, and some people, I think it's misleading, like to the ordinary Zimbabwean, what the sanctions are doing, what's sanctioned, the effects, if they're actually affecting everything that's happening in the country. We are kind of misled in a way.
I actually feel like
as
it also, as journalists in the country, also comes back to us because we haven't written much on sanctions. We just write the effect of illegal. You see, she doesn't even know why they are illegal sanctions. That means I'm not doing my job very well, and all those in the media fraternity who are not exactly, telling people what it is, why they're called illegal sanctions, and what are sanctions even to begin with.
I don't think we really need to focus on them being illegal sanctions because we all know which particular publishing house decides to use that adjective with regards to the sanctions. But either way, like Nicola said, we really need to have a talk on this before we even decide on going to another match and giving the locals another public holiday. We really need to focus on the sanctions, the irregularities, if they're there, who it is affecting, and if what exactly needs to be done.
Of course, so earlier on you said the effects of the sanctions, the anti-sanction march, did it even have any results? So actually it did, and according to the Daily News there, it says Trump fires warning shots at Ed and Zanu PF. So, and the story reads, in an ominous development for President Emerson Mnangagwa and his under-pressure government, the United States of America has slapped State Security Minister Owen Ncube with sanctions over allegations of gross human rights violations, the Daily News on Sunday can report. So I can imagine the reactions. When you do something and then you expect a result, some result, and alas, something else actually comes out. So yeah, so that's what happened over the weekend.
And you know what? It's sad for State Security Minister Mr. Owen Ncube, and it's a plus one to the sanctions list.
Of course. So I think since we had 141, now we have 142.
It joins Lucy Grace and the late President Rob Mugabe. A very good morning to Emmanuel Nyokonda and Michael Chibondo. And Michael is saying, what is Trump saying to... Well, I can't use the exact word he used, but he's saying, what is Trump saying to ED? Trump is simply not moved.
Yeah.
That's all we can say. Trump is not moved, and I think the United States and the EU are still maintaining their positions. And if you were following, since like Nico had said, from Friday and over the weekend, the U.S. Embassy, from Thursday actually, the U.S. Embassy and EU have been tweeting, EU and Zimbabwe have been tweeting about shedding a bit more light regards the sanctions, and I'm sure they're also trying to demystify the idea that the locals have with regards to the sanctions. And now from the Herald, the headline reads, NAST develops Zim's first trolley bus. And the story in detail. The National University of Science and Technology, NUST, is developing Zimbabwe's first prototype electric bus, which it expects to improve the country's public transportation system. Alec Ngube, acting director of the NUST Innovation Hub, says the Faculty of Industrial and Manufacturing Engineering will be working with WISE Africa Technologies in a private-public partnership project that is set to introduce the latest technology of an integrated electric trolley train bus. And I quote, "We're so excited about it, and we hope that this project will quickly come to fruition as it will help solve some of the challenges we face as a country," he says. So from electric cars to...
And yeah, I hope it's gonna be affordable to the public. I feel like I'm going to regret saying this. Probably they won't come through. Because we've been having issues even with the tape cards.
Where's you woman of little faith?
No, we've been having, guys, issues with the tape card. You know, where you're just supposed to
just tap and get on the bus.
and get on a bus. We're still lagging behind in a system where you need to just tap and get in the bus. But anyway, that's a story for another day, of course. I'm still on the Herald. Fresh pay hike for civil servants on the cards. Civil servants are like the celebrities in Zimbabwe. But anyway, the story reads, government is lining up another salary adjustment for civil servants to cushion them from the unwarranted price increases that business continued to effect. This was said by Finance and Economic Development Minister Professor Mthuli Ncube in an interview with journalists at the National Sports Stadium on Friday on the sidelines of the Saturday Day of Solidarity against sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe by the West. And I quote, "We are going to have another adjustment as we speak. Then we are going to pay the bonus in November. So we are doing our best in gradually supporting civil servants," close quote, he said.
A very good morning to Marshal Musiyiwa, who is saying it's better they add some embargo to Zanu PF top hierarchy. And Emmanuel is saying, "Torch newspaper to pay." Marshal, we have 141 people on the, now 142 if we include our Minister Ncube to that list. So, okay, but I totally hear and understand you. Are you happy with the civil servants issue?
Well, we'll just see how much it's gonna be. I mean, probably it's like peanuts. Remember what happens when you give your workers peanuts. I rest my case. I won't go any further.
And Emmanuel is replying to Marshall. He's saying in the diaspora they will feel the pinch like Mudinda. I feel for the Zanu PF officials who leave Zimbabwe and go to like other countries, especially in the West. They haven't been receiving the hero's welcome or anything like that. But that's a story for another day. Moving on, still on the Herald, ministers sanctioning drones government are. Government has fired a salvo at the United States of America's decision to add to its sanctions list State Security Minister Ed Zanu PF allegations of gross violations of human rights, describing the move as absurd. The U.S. state government last week announced that it was adding Minister Ncube on the blacklist, with the department claiming it had credible information of his involvement in gross violations of human rights. So it never rains but pours for the Zanu PF government and the top hierarchy. I'm sure even others who are not on the list are now worried that what if I'm the next, you just wake up and you're on the sanctions blacklist and you probably have your child in the US, and when she graduates you can't go there.
Yeah.
Why am I even picturing that for anyone?
Well, it's just those are some of the possibilities of things that can happen. Anyway, moving on to the news day. We ain't moved by much, EU and US says. And the story in detail.
The hundreds of buses